Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Alan, it's good to see you again.
It is good to see you. Oh, I don't know about you. There's a lot going on for the end of the year.
Yeah, there's things that I'm like hands-on doing. Lots of things that's going on at the end of the year, trying to get last-minute things done before the year's over. And then
Yeah,
there's still this constant new information coming in. So
constant new information. We'll be talking about that more next week, actually. But this week, kind of what I wanted to talk about is some thoughts that were inspired by a presentation that I did in an odd sort of way. So a couple of weeks back, I was at DevFest Bronx, and I did a presentation on Gemini 1 year later as the keynote. And I got off stage, and for the rest of the day, I had people saying, great presentation and so forth. But I didn't think it was a great presentation. I thought it was an okay presentation, but I didn't think it was great. And it wasn't until someone said to me, it was a good presentation at the end, but kind of by the middle, you were just kind of, just telling us what was going on. And the structure that I had presented in was a timeline. So, it was looking at what happened in Gemini over the past year. And you can see this video on my YouTube channel, and I've posted it on LinkedIn as well. Um, and their comment made me realize that that was the problem, was that I was was giving information and I was trying to present something, but I had lost what the narrative was.
mm,
So I think maybe let's talk about how we, when we're building our presentations, when we're building our tutorials, our videos, our documents, or even when we're mentoring new developers, how do we get that across? How do we help them understand what we want them to understand?
yeah, no, that's a great topic. It's we could probably talk for a long time
We
about different
probably could.
aspects of
Yeah.
that. Specifically, your case on the video on the presentation, sorry, that you did, like how many things were you listing? What was kind of the idea
Well,
of?
so that was kind of it. Is that it was literally a timeline of Gemini for the past year, because Gemini is now a year old.
Yeah.
So it was literally every single feature that has launched in Gemini. So we're talking dozens of features
Oh wow.
spread
Yeah.
out over 12 months, with some of them being concentrated in the summer. So in some cases, it really did seem like I was saying, and then we got this feature, and then we got this feature, and then we got this feature. And occasionally I would take a break and say, and then we got this feature, and here's what this feature is and why it's good. Or I would say, and this new model was released and it was cheaper. But I didn't say how much cheaper. I, never really kind of drove. I think in this particular case, what happened, or where I feel I let the audience down, was that I never had this narrative of here's where we started and here's where we ended up. Here's what you could do at the beginning and for how much. And here's what we can do now. And here's how much cheaper it is. What have we
So
gained along the way?
okay,
Okay.
so you were trying to present in essence the message of just like wow, just look how far we've gone in a year, and look how it's changed from what we could do to what we could do now.
That was
Is
kind of it. And the
okay.
closing messages, the messages that I ended with were twofold. One was, this is what happened in the past year. Can you imagine what's going to happen in the next year?
Okay. Yep.
And then kind of tie it into the whole general theme of DevFest, which in my mind is, and you can do this. This is now there for you to use. What are you going to do with it? What can you do with it?
Okay. So a
I can't
challenge.
wait to see
Yeah.
what you're going to do with it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see.
So, right. And I feel like that part of the message kind of came across. People responded well to that. But I didn't explain why I had been talking for 20 minutes before I said that. I didn't say a year ago when we started out, we had just gotten function calls, and here's why function calls are good. And now function calls are better, faster, cheaper. Or now we have these other tools in addition to function calls. I never made that connection, and I feel that's an important part of helping people understand what they're doing, is understanding why they're doing it
Yeah.
and how to do it. You know, so you know, and I feel like that's important on a lot of what we talk about every week is, yes, here's a cool feature. Why do you care?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
How are you using it? Where do we see it going? Things like that. Yeah. So interestingly, a number of years ago, I read a book called Made to Stick, which was all about telling a story about something.
Yes.
So I think that's one thing that we try to do, especially in a medium like a presentation or a video. I guess to a certain degree, if it's a long blog post or something as well, you kind of want to tell a story or tell a narrative so that it's easier to understand instead of just like a blast of facts or something.
No, an excellent point. And I feel like part of the reason for that is that in many ways that's kind of how we tend to learn it. We've got this internal narrative story of, and here's how I learned this. So I'm now going to tell you the story of how I learned it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because each developer that's approaching a topic comes with their own past experience and what programming languages they've learned and how they approached it, and so just because the way that we present things seem to be clear to us, we may need to back up and define terms or kind of give a little bit more of a background of why we're approaching it from this angle or something like that.
And I think that's important to understand why we're approaching it from that angle.
Yeah.
Is, that again, that helps with the narrative of why is this important? What does this mean? And the struggle always is, how do you present all of this in a nice compact form?
Yeah.
And part of the beauty of telling a story is that stories have that compactness structure as part of them.
Yeah, I don't know if you've got the same problem that I do, but like if I were to do a presentation, it seems like there's a lot more slides at the beginning of the process, and it's more about how do I try to put in what I think needs to be there, and then I have to start looking about, well, what things should I be taking out, right? Is that just too much?
Yeah.
Is 40 slides in 20 minutes too much? Yeah.
My usually I have the other issue is that often I will create this narrative, and I'll set up my slides to tell the narrative, and that's great. And then I'm like, oh right, but I also need to mention this.
Oh,
Does that fit in the narrative? How does that fit in the narrative? But it's important that I say this, so that so I'll start adding slides in, and getting worried that I'm now adding slides that are detracting from my story.
yeah. That's a challenge. Anything else you wanted to talk about specifically about this presentation, or do we want to open it up to other things?
No, it was just the launching point for how do we impart information, because it's important.
It is important. So, for example, like recently, it's not necessarily AI directed, but it is kind of follows a pattern that I've learned over the years of what works for me. Is when I'm learning something new, like I've been doing some stuff with Blue Sky and App Protocol and something called Jetstream, and so as I'm learning something new, I'm reading different things. I'm watching videos. I'm kind of trying to form a mental model of how it makes sense to me. Oh, this is like this, or this contrasts with this other thing. And so I just start to make notes. And so I come up with something, like in this case, I came up with a quick guide. It wasn't trying to explain everything, but it had a section of terms. One of the things that I really like to do is try to figure out diagrams. If something doesn't have diagrams, and I try to think of how it would look, because visually that helps me set boundaries to what it is. So you start off with something and then you learn something else and you're like, oh, I've got to add this to the diagram, or I've got to change this part of the diagram. But that's kind of helps me learn things as I go to do a diagram. So I created this quick sheet, and then what I wanted to do is go ahead and share that quick sheet as a video, so somebody could, to have the advantage of just looking at the 2-page PDF and see, but sometimes it's helpful to have somebody explain why it's, that went together that way. So then in that case, I wanted to create a video, and I wanted to make sure that, like, within the first 2 minutes, you actually saw things in action, so that you can say, like, oh, I'm going from this and I connect to this WebSocket and I start seeing things. Now, what am I seeing? And then go through the quick guide and explain, well, this is this and this is this and how this fits together. And you don't want to watch 15 minutes of a 20-minute video and finally get to the point where you're doing something, if at all possible, right?
No, that's an excellent point, and that's actually a challenge in
It
a
is.
lot of ways, is that you want to, there's this irresistible temptation to say, here, let's just jump in with the code, and you'll see the code and it'll make sense, and then we'll explain it. And they never get to the explanation, and you really feel like there's a lot more you need to help them understand up front.
Yeah.
Before they see that's always a real temptation on my part, is I want to say, here's what we're going to do, but here are the 20 things you need to know before we get there. And I know I'm going to lose them by item 2. They're not going to get that far. But I think it's an excellent point. You need to have that quick hook of, here's what you're going to see. Here's what we're doing. Here's what the payoff is going to be. And we'll explain why that's the payoff as we go.
Yeah.
Something else you said that I think is a really, really excellent point is that what you're presenting, when you present stuff, it's because you have taken concepts from a bunch of different sources and somehow put them all together. It was you read this and it didn't quite click, and you read this and it added more info, but it still didn't click. And when you read enough, suddenly it all clicks, and you're like, oh, this was the piece that I was missing, and if I had learned it in this order, it all would have made more sense. And that's how you present it, because that might be the right way to get the right way that somebody else will get it.
Yeah, and one of the things I've over time I've gotten more comfortable with this. I used to feel like, well, I have to know everything before I can do a video about it, and in some cases I feel like I'm 2 or 3 steps ahead of somebody. Is all. I'm like, last week I knew nothing about this, and this is what I've learned in a week. And depending on how much time I was able to dedicate to it, it could be a significant amount of things, and that might be like that critical. Maybe somebody can jump in and at the end of this video be where I was 2 or 3 days into something, right? And just be able to get somebody off and going on a new concept quickly.
At one of the dev fests that I attended this year, that I watched, and I wish I remember which one and who it was that said this. One of the best ways to learn a subject is to say you're going to do a presentation on it. To commit to a presentation or commit to a document or commit, because that means you now need to get in and understand it well enough so you can explain it, even if you've never done it before.
Yeah, and don't be afraid that because there might even some of these topics I might understand them only 60%, right? Or I could have misunderstood something, but that's kind of like you opening yourself up with a little bit of risk, and worst case somebody comes back to me and say this is wrong because of this, and you're like, oh cool, now I understand that better.
You understand it better, you've issued a correction, and you have another article or another video to talk about what you just learned.
Yep. So I do find things like social media helpful to like quick little things that I've learned, like, hey, I've learned this, here's a link to a sample project or to a video. So social media is good for getting some things out there quickly. But I also like doing small like projects, sample projects. Like when I was learning Jovel 4, there were a couple sample projects, but I wanted to take one of those and I want to understand better how components work together, or I want to understand how you create a plugin, or different things like that. And so those are the types of things I would tackle, and then do a video or do an article or something on, and share what I've learned.
One of the things that's really a challenge for me sometimes is, I'm looking at, a sample code and I'm like, this is a lot for me to digest. But, if I want to do something, what are the two lines that I start with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how do I build from those two lines? And it's why I don't necessarily like following other sample code. I don't like seeing sample code. Because, and I know people do, and I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yep.
I'm just saying this is what works better for me. Is that I like being given a challenge and saying, here's something you can do with this, whatever. Go figure out how to do it. And this helps me really understand, well, what does this do and why does it do it? And if I'm looking at code, at someone else's code, I may just look at it and say, well, it works, I don't know why. And that's not what I want. I want to understand why.
Yeah.
And I mean, going back to AI, we're seeing AI tools are beginning to get better at explaining what some of these chunks are actually doing.
Yeah, I saw some just the other day. Somebody spent 15 minutes. It was a video on how to create the connections game from New York Times. I can't remember what framework they were using for Android, cross Android and iOS development, but it was using AI code assist type tools to, go from zero to an app that was working, and it just kind of blew my mind. And I think that's the type of thing that AI is gonna help with more and more.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about that lots.
Yeah.
I think what is challenging to me though is that a lot of times I'll see people treated Stack Overflow the same way. So this is not exactly new.
Yep.
Is that they will say, "Oh, got code, great, looks like it works, wonderful, I'm done." Instead of saying, "Okay, this code appears to work. Why?
Yeah.
Why does this code work and my code didn't? What's the big difference? What are we doing here?" And I think that's important to getting a real understanding of how code works.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the Ultra approach too, going from code and saying, explain to me what this code is, or what are the parameters, and so that's what I see a lot of things, or how I'm using AI as I'm coding, is just to better understand. Especially I'm in multiple code bases where, Python's is still new to me, and so in some cases I'm like, this is really a wonky syntax. What is this? And I'm like, oh, okay, this is what it's doing.
I'm the same way, even about JavaScript, even about Java. There's I was reading something about using a recent version of the Spring AI tools, and I read some code. And I'm looking at this code, going, I don't understand this syntax at all. This doesn't look anything like what I'm used to. And I fed that into an AI. I said, what is this? And it gave me the term, and I went and looked up the term, and it was in a relatively recent version of Java that I'd never used.
Yeah.
And now I walked away knowing something.
Yeah. So, and I guess that's how I would like to approach different content that I do, is try to have it be more of a conversation about what it is and why it's important, and I think AI tools can only go so far. They're going to get better and better, and we'll find new ways to use them. But as I try to learn something new, I try to present it in a way that makes sense. You had said something earlier about mentoring, and that's one of the points with that I found is trying to understand, asking some questions, trying to figure out where they're coming from on something. They could be, brand new, zero, or learn part of it, or or an old hat at it, right? And so that I might have to explain a number of different concepts that they're new to if they're not familiar with it, and as opposed to jumping more in and kind of like, well, we see from here this, or so kind of how we're mentoring somebody trying to work through coming to a common understanding of code really depends on where they're starting from, and that's I feel like that's my job. Well, and I guess our job together to come to a point where we understand where the best place to start from. And sometimes I've just had to ask them, like, what's the best way to learn it? Or would it be more helpful if I approached it from this way with the diagram? Or is there something else that you want to do? Do you want to do something and then come back and, it's just, I've had to kind of step back from how would be the good way to present it to asking what's the best way for me to work with you so that you better understand it.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting that you say that. The big thing that triggered in my mind is, on one hand, it's kind of the same as writing an article or doing a video because you're presenting information. On the other, you've got both an advantage and a disadvantage tied into one, and that's that you're working with a person and they can give you immediate feedback on what you're saying. They can say, I don't get it, or can you explain that again? The downside to that, though, is, if you're saying, well, I don't know how else to explain it.
Or like I'm presenting and like one of us is getting frustrated. I can feel either I'm frustrated or you're frustrated, and so like how do we go back to that? And part of it, I think, especially maybe more junior people that I've worked with, there's a level of anxiety that like you're interacting with somebody and now I'm on the spot and I don't want to look dumb, and and so I try to like clear the slate and say, we're jumping into this. There's some things I understand. There's some things I don't. That's okay. Let's kind of figure it out, and trying to provide like a safe space. I collabed with somebody this last week where they were working on stuff with the language model, and I was trying to say, well, how does this fit into the service that's going to use the model? Because we had some like options that we're trying to choose from, and I was trying to figure out, I don't want just the differences of how the options are differently from a machine learning side of things. I'm trying to figure out how it affects the architecture. And so the best thing that we ended up doing was just jumping on and just drawing some diagrams as we were going through, and like, oh, nope, we'll draw a box over here. What are we going to call this? Blah, blah, blah. There were a couple points where we backtracked and we had to we're like, oh, we were more right the first time on this. And so it was definitely collaborative, but it was nice in the fact that we did both come to a better understanding, a more shared understanding at the end. But there was a part that was a little dicey in the middle, and there's a certain level of vulnerability just jumping in and saying, okay, let's just noodle this together, right?
Yes,
but
that's always
but I actually said that. I'm like, and because I wanted to make sure that it was like this is collaborative and we're just thinking here. There's no repercussions here. Let's just figure out what we can figure out.
So I think these are all great approaches about how we want to make sure we communicate and help people. I feel like something you said was really kind of the real germ here, is that we're working together to get to a level of understanding. And that's absolutely vitally important. If I'm up on the stage, it may seem very one way, but truly what it is I need to work with the audience. If we're doing a video, we need to be working with whoever's going to eventually watch this.
Yep.
I think that's important, and I think that's great. And in that spirit, if you have a technique that you use to help people understand, that you use to write blogs or do videos or do presentations or work with a mentee or work with a mentor, we'd love to hear about it. Feel free to leave comments below. You can find us on social networks. And this is a topic I suspect we'll be returning to on Two Voice Steps.
Two Voice Steps. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great week.
You too.